All right, everybody. Hi there. This is April 28th, and this is the Becker Tinderbox Patreon meetup. This is where I host a 1 hour session with those that are part of my Tinderbox Patreon community, aka those people that are so graciously giving me a stipend to help me support my Tinderbox habit. And so with that in mind, I have Paul Christie with me today, and we'll see if anybody else from the community joins us. But hey, I do this stuff by myself. So if I got Paul, that's great. And the more we get, the merrier. But let's just jump right in. I've got a lot to show up from my end for this month's episode. But sounds like Paul's been working on something this morning too, and we can dig into some of the ideas that he has. So with that in mind, welcome to the April session. And Paul, how's it going, man? You having a good month?
I'm having a great month, and I will tell you, I have been away from Tinderbox for a while and solving problems with other systems. I got, my life is the following. I'm retired after 40 years from working in executive jobs, and I'm now either president or vice president of 4 nonprofit boards. So that keeps
Oh,
me.
my condolences. That's a
Yeah,
lot of work.
exactly. That's the right sentiment to have. But anyways, there's all kinds of details with those things, and as I work on information systems to track the projects and the areas, and using Tiago Forte's para structure kind of works for me a lot of times. I more and more in my other systems find what I'm really dealing with is notes and attributes. And if I would only force myself into treating all the things that happen or related to a node as an attribute, then that would give me a lot more flexibility to pull things back, to search for them, to structure them in better ways. And then I immediately think, well, that's what Tinderbox is all about. I'm my go-to PKM structure usually is dump everything into DevonThink, do as much as I can there, and then start to create some mind mapping around what I've got there, because DevonThink stops at the document level and doesn't give me much more to go on. And then I get stuck because I'm tracking tasks, I'm tracking people, I'm tracking attributes about notes, and I usually kind of give up and just start making phone calls. What I want to do is start every process with Tinderbox, because I'm really tracking individual at atomic notes and all kinds of attributes about them. So that's where I am this morning, trying to track my attributes. And so I started a project this morning just to describe it. I thought, here's something interesting to test my knowledge of attributes in Tinderbox. I work out in one format almost every day, weight workouts or cardio. So I thought, why don't I dump the output of my workout program into a note, pull it apart with regex, and then I have all these abilities to track the attributes around that, the progress, volume, everything else. So I started playing with that just as a learning process to get smarter about regex and Tinderbox. So anyways, that's where I am this morning.
Wow. Okay. You just unpacked a load on us.
I know, and I'm not asking for anything
No, no, no.
solution. I'm
But
just asking. I just want to describe what's going on in my
no,
head.
no, no, no. But that's the whole point of these calls. All right. When you're a Becker patron supporter, you get to do that, and then we get to interact on that.
Yep.
Now you as part of the unpacking though, I think and I by the way, I've gone through the same process that you have, and there's a number of things that have come to my mind on this, in that some of the key concepts I need to really learn was abstraction, the idea that there's data over here and there's data over there, and letting my mind make those connections for me. And the more I do it, the more my mind maps to that, and my mind remembers, that data is over here. If I
Yeah.
know it's over here, then I can use it over there. So that's a really important concept. The other concept is incremental formalization. Unlike any other tool that I've ever seen, the Tinderbox environment allows us to incrementally improve and incrementally change and incrementally evolve, that no other method or process does. So I want to dig in and let's talk about that a little bit. The other thing you mentioned, I think was really important is Tiago Forte's work.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen with this real quick. So Tiago Forte is a leader in personal knowledge management. I've not yet personally met him. I'm trying, and he has developed a method called the second brain. He's got a method he calls the para method, and the para method basically says he wants you to organize or encompass your life into 4 areas: para, project, area, resource, archive. So basically, you come up with a project structure. You think about the area of that, the long-term responsibilities you want to manage over time, and the projects are your short-term areas. So this is kind of long-term, short-term. Then resources. What are the topics, interests that may be useful for you in the future? And then an archive. So for this, I refer to this as like the atomic notes. And if you look at in my Tinderbox files and the videos we've done before, I call that my resources folder. These are resources, atomic notes, ideas that I'll repurpose and use across a whole bunch of different activities. So, and Paul, you just called it out. What are some of those? People, right? You know,
Right.
my note for Paul Christie, there will only be one of them because there is only one Paul Christie in the world, and that is you. And that
Right.
you can have a name and a headshot and a LinkedIn URL and a phone number. And this and that Paul Christie may interact with 5 different tasks and 3 different projects and 2 different X's. And you want to be able to propagate that throughout the process. And that's what Tinderbox does. And then finally, when you're done with a particular initiative or project in your life, you want to be able to push it out and archive it. And put it into other categories that you can access and redo later. So his framework is a really useful and powerful mnemonic for doing that. But what Tiago doesn't is, to the best I understand, someone can call me wrong, he doesn't really call out a particular tool. I think he uses tools like DevonThink and Roam and others, but he doesn't necessarily. This is more of a mind approach for doing your note taking, not necessarily the technical approach for doing it, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
But it's super useful and helpful. Um, so, and then you brought up a term called regex for those that are listening. Regex refers to regular expression. It was a computing method built in the 1950s, which is the underpins nearly every computing platform today, which allows you to be able to use a particular command line syntax in the computer to be able to transform text. And we can give some demonstrations of that in just a minute. And then you're right. You talked about tasks, projects, people, attributes. So Paul, if it's not confidential, I can either show you stuff on my side to illustrate some of these examples, or if it's not confidential, you can show us what you're working on, and let's just update your file.
Well, let's see. So, um,
Or we can start from a new file.
let me. So, here's something. Can I share this?
You can share anything you want.
Let's see. Let's see. All right. So I've made a stab over time, and a lot of this comes from looking at your templates and borrowing prototypes and actions and stamps as it comes along. But I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to create a Tinderbox document and see how big it gets and create it just with that para framework: projects, areas, resources, and archives. And um, I'm not sophisticated enough to automate a lot, so I'm just, as you say, progressive formulation. I'm throwing things into it and moving them around and thinking, hey, I could automate this, as I learn. So I've got in here, a whole bunch of projects that I track with OmniFocus as my tool. I've got some areas that are those long-term, nonprofit boards that I'm part of, and I throw basically everything else into resources, which may or may not be the right answer. But if I read something, if I listen to a podcast, if I'm tracking something in any of my GTD categories, high level categories, I throw it into resources, and I'm at the point where now I'm thinking, okay, I'm tracking all these things. I'm kind of mimicking what DevonThink would do. Now, how do I bring the power of Tinderbox in terms of linking and the rest of the tools to make this a really useful second brain?
Okay. Now, oh God, there's so many terms here. It's exciting. Um, so a couple things. You OmniFocus is an outlining tool that people use. Jobs to be done, or GTD, is a concept called jobs to be done. I don't remember who it was. Christensen who coined that.
Dave Allen.
Dave Allen. Dave Allen. And that's a core concept of of how we manage and do task management. You then also referred to DevonThink. DevonThink is a great document repository and analysis tool. So I can see how you're thinking that that's DevonThink, but Tinderbox is certainly more than that. And this idea of a second brain is this whole concept of we should be using tools like this that allow us to get out our second brain. Now, I think you're great. If I can be so bold and interject my own opinion, if you don't mind, I'd like to
Sure.
suggest that. First and foremost, and maybe I can request control, and you can give me control, and that way I can click around in your file and play with it. Some immediate things that come out of mind when you're having projects. Part of the challenge is how are you going to, what happens if you end up having a note with the same name or a project with the same name? So I find using the concept of and let's say we're zip linking, right?
Yeah.
How do I distinguish these different things from, say, a project versus a person versus a paper versus an article? Like, what if you had a article called Olay Bags S23 class, and you
Right.
had a project of the same name? You'd
Yeah.
have no way of being able to distinguish that.
Yeah, and I've run into that problem.
Right. So how do you solve that problem? You solve that problem by using what I call a prefix. So you call this a project, right? And so your note is project this versus ART article this,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And that's super, super helpful. Now that drives an issue though. And the issue is, what happens if you want to use that project name in one of your outputs or one of your reports, but you don't want that that prefix
Prefix.
on the
Yeah.
note? Okay, I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but that's where some of the automation stuff of the value of Tinderbox comes into play. So that's one thing to think about. Um, and then I noticed too, you're clearly sorting this by alphabetical order,
Right.
and so that's fine. That's why that's jumping down that way. So let me just take a note. So so one thing we're going to do is prefix is one concept. Now, the other concept I'll want to share with you as I'm thinking through and I look at this is, I think at some point what you're going to find is, as great as this mind mapping of project area resources is, you'll effectively diverge from that at some point, and then you'll give yourself some cognitive dissonance and give yourself some stress. The nice thing about Tinderbox is, because when you're working in attributes, your notes can be anywhere, right? They can physically be anywhere. And because of attributes, what's going to essentially categorize them is the attribute values, not their artificial hierarchical structure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. So don't get hung up. Like, if you have something, an area like thing in project, you can always move it and get it there later, but don't let your mind get so artificially stuck to the hierarchical structure. Now, having some structure is critically important. Otherwise, you have anarchy and chaos. But if you have too much structure, then you become rigid and you die.
Yeah.
And you stop using your system. So the other thing I just want to coach you on that is use the structure, but don't let that structure cause you stress. The second you find that structure causing you stress, diverge from the structure, because you know that you can always come back.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and that's where the incremental formalization comes into play. So hopefully that will be helpful. The other thing, what I would do is, just from a naming nomenclature, when you have containers, call them folders, right? So that is the project folder. This is going to be the area folder, right? Because again, much like the idea of prefixes, when you have something that's a container, call it a container, call it a folder, because then both visually that helps and naming wise that helps. For search it helps, because later you can go give me, and you can ask an agent, go give me everything that's a folder. Or when you're running a report, ignore everything that's got folder in its name. So that way you can get the notes and the lists of your projects without necessarily getting the names of your containers stuck in your output.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So would you make a prototype for a folder, that
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and do that. So why don't you go ahead and let's create a prototype for us.
yeah. So if I go in here and say do P folder.
Right. And for those that are watching this, the reason why we do P, lowercase p, that's just stands for prototype, and that allows you to distinguish a prototype note from some other note. It's just a naming syntax and convention. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what
So
I
when
would
I go ahead and do this, it helps me immediately since I've created it under the prototypes container. It's automatically, if I go into Tinderbox properties, it's automatically a prototype, so I don't have to think about that.
correct.
I close that out.
And then
I usually try to find some indicator of what it is. So I think I have a folder prototype already. If I don't, who knows? I'll probably
and
find
just so
one
people are looking
somewhere
at that, so go back to users. What Paul has done is dropped in his own custom icons there. If you click on classic, by the way,
yeah,
that's my favorite folder one's right there in the middle.
right there.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So now you've now apply that folder to those three projects, those four.
So if I come up here now to the project area and choose, I'm sorry, bad on me. I got that. I guess I can do this, right?
Right.
And select multiple. They all become folders.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. You might as well do that for archive too.
Here we go. Yeah.
Okay. Now, by doing that, what's interesting is what you then want to do, and let me go ahead and take control. So if I go here, what I would tend to do here is then you start thinking about, okay, well, what's going on here? So I'm going to put an on add. So every folder is going to get the on add function. So anytime I add something to this, I'll be able to on add. And again, the reason why I do it here is just easier to type it. But let's think about, you also have another prototype that you'll tend to want to use.
Right.
And I tend to like this one for the little science objects. So it's P project. And so if we go here and we say prototype equals, come on, can't type, equals P project. Okay. And what we're demonstrating here is action code. And so Tinderbox has a scripting language called action code, and there's different ways to trigger action code: on adds, on removes, on visits, rules, edicts. We can explain those later, but those allow you to automate functionality within Tinderbox. So if you look up here, and again, we don't want to do it on the folder level. Actually, we want to do it on the specific one. So, come on. Come on. So we're going to delete it out of here, and we're going to go up to this project, and we're going to say, in the projects folder, we want to say the prototype. I cannot type. Prototype. Did I spell that right? Okay. So what we're saying is make the prod. So when and again, here's another little Tinderbox tip. If you hit Shift Option Enter, when you're selected a note, it automatically adds a child note to a note. Really, really useful, right? As opposed to if I hit here and I just hit Enter, it adds a note. But if I hit Shift Option Enter, it adds a child.
Very helpful.
Okay. And now if you noticed, when I do project equals P prototype this, it's automatically a project note.
Yeah.
Right. And the reason why I know is you can see it's got the icon there. And if I go like this, you can see that and right mouse click on it, you'll see that it's got the project prototype through that on add function automatically. So that's an automation that's really helpful. Now, here's another trick that I learned that I figured out, which is really cool. So if I do ampersand, and I say if name equals untitled, then name equals project.
Ah, very cool.
Right?
Very cool.
Now, assuming I didn't spell anything right. Okay, just a minute. I might have spelled something wrong. If name equals untitled name project. Okay. All right, I broke something. Just a minute. Prototype equals P project. Oh, it's not an and. That was sorry. That's agent language. I totally miffed that. Semicolon. All right. So what I'm saying is make a prototype project, and then there you go. Yep. So now it automatically adds a prefix to a project.
Yep. Perfect.
And it's that kind of automation that really, really just helps the process. It creates consistency. It creates a whole bunch of other, valuable things within Tinderbox. Useful.
Yep. And that's a fairly simple, without even opening up a coding box in the prototypes. You've done it right in the node itself.
Correct. Now here's some other things to think about then. So if we go to project, well, what do projects have? Projects have
they have dates, due dates, they
have start date, they have due date. And it looks like participant is a system generated attribute. So let's see if it is. That is participant one. Okay, so participant is a system level attribute. And I think it's a string, not a set. Let's double check. That matters.
It's part of events. Okay.
Yeah, it's part of events, but where is it? Default value participant is, I'm not seeing if it's a set or a string. That's interesting.
You would think it would be a set.
You would, but I'm not sure that it is. Here, that's this word. That's where I look. Yes. So participants is a set. And that's important because that allows us to have unique names. So for example, if I go up here and we now go to projects and we go to this project and we go here, we can have Michael Becker and Paul.
Does it matter if it's semicolons or commas there?
Yeah, it does. Okay. Yeah, so sets are separate. Items in a set are separated by a semicolon. Okay. Now here's a little bit of magic that I want to show you. That's going to be super, super fun, and we can automate it a little bit more later. But watch what I'm going to do now, and I'm going to see if I can do it on the fly while I remember. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to. I'm sorry, I'm on my computer. Can you? You're only sharing the window. Can you go up to the file menu? Go up to file and click. Let me find the name. Go to file menu and click file, built-in hints. Okay. Nope. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So what you did is you added in the built-in hints capability. And we're going to write ourselves a quick little function. And we're going to say like this, and we'll say F. Oops, no. And it's going to be F. Great. No. And I've got some more advanced ones on this, but it will help you understand the idea. So if you remember from Tiago's method, what you're doing here is you're wanting to create a resources folder, right? Right. And so the idea is I want to have resources, and some of the resources that you told me you want is a people folder. And because that's an important aspect of your project. And so therefore we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to go ahead and grab this and go like that. And this time it's going to be person. And for people, I can explain later, but I don't have the convention of adding a prefix to people. But we'll have a people folder. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and create a task folder. right? So you're going to want to be thinking about these are actually a task folder, or let's create another one called entities, because tasks will be something different, right?
Now, what do you consider an entity?
I consider an entity, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this. An entity to me is a group of something, an organization, a nonprofit, a government, a project team, as opposed to a person. And if you're thinking about the atomic ideas of it, what you want to do is, when I spent like a year messing around with this. And when I first got stuck with the hierarchical structure, I'm like, I've got a company, and now I'm going to put that person under the company because that's where the person works.
Right.
But then I quickly realized, well, wait a minute, people work with multiple initiatives. Paul Christie actually works with 4 entities, 4 nonprofits.
Right.
So in burying Paul Christie under, which of the 4 nonprofits do I bury Paul under? So I need to separate them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Because then
So
they become atomic.
they become atomic in that regard. So Paul Christie, the atomic note, interacts with one of these 4 nonprofit atomic notes, which then may work, and then each of those may work with a project, which is another atomic note.
Right. Right.
Okay, so that's the abstraction thinking that starts playing itself out. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep. And then you can do searches and agents and everything else.
Correct. So now if we go up here, we go like this, and we now go P entity, and then we've got another entity like that. Okay. And then that automatically quickly tells us we need an entity. And we go like this, and an entity is like a little group. There you go. And so now you can see how we're starting to incrementally formalize our process.
Yep. And what I have copied from you in the past, I don't have it here, but I forget what it is. Maybe it's a way to change the name of the folder, but put in brackets the number of children under it. So you start to see how much you're adding to the.
Correct. So let's go ahead and show you that real quick. And I got to pull something else up while I'm at it. Okay. So you raised something really important. So what you're talking about is this idea called displayed expressions.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, for example, here I've got this folder, and I can go like this, and we don't need to show this stuff, but I find that sometimes it's helpful to show it.
Metadata.
Right. So if I go here like child count, so every note's got a system attribute called child count. So I know that this has 18 projects in it. But what we want to do is we want to visually show it here. So if I go up here and I say, under displayed expression, I say equals name plus base plus child count plus.
And the autocomplete is very nice there.
Right. So now I've automatically got my child counts displayed. Now, the beautiful thing about this by using displayed expressions is you'll see here, the name of the note doesn't change, but what I'm visually seeing is the displayed expression attribute does. So again, that's another form of increment of attribution management, right? I want the name of the note to be pure, but I do visually want to see the child count because it helps me in the outline.
Yeah. Michael, as you're going along here, is Tinderbox automatically saving the document every, so many
seconds? Yeah,
okay.
Every few seconds. Yeah. So that's what's going on with that. So now let's go through and let me show you something else. So one other thing that we need to do, and I call this F short title, okay, is we want to make sure, and I'm just gonna, I don't need to visually see it anymore. But remember, when you're using Tinderbox, every note has every attribute, whether or not it's visually seen or not.
Yeah.
But when you're in the earlier days, just so you can start learning to, it's like training wheels, so that you can start learning the system and appreciating.
Yeah.
I find until I am comfortable with that, my action code is working. I want to visually see the mechanics of those, and then as I get more and more adept to it, I don't no longer need to visually see it anymore. So if you're looking here, Paul, what I'm doing is I'm creating an attribute called short title, right? And so what I want is I want the capability to strip out the prefix and create yet another attribute. So I've got the name that has a prefix. And then I have another attribute called short title that has the name without the prefix. So therefore I can then later use it.
Yep.
Okay. And when we talk about later using it, it means it's like putting it in a reports, emailing it, sending it to people, doing things like that. So let me show you what we'll do here. So we're going to go function F short title.
And this is using action code.
So this is using action code. This is using action code in the functions capability of Tinderbox. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and so we'll comment it first, and we'll say, create a short title. Actually, it's really strip prefix from name and populate. Okay. All right. So that just tells us what our code's going to do. So I'm going to create a variable called the string. And I'm going to say v short title. And then I'm going to say v short title. I'll explain this in just a minute. Equals name dot replace okay, and what I'm asking it to do is replace, and now this is where regex comes into play. What I'm saying is starting at the beginning of the line, and I need a quote here, starting at the beginning of the line, what do I want you to do? I want you to grab every character up until the hyphen and a space. And so this is regular expression. It's saying start at the beginning of a line of text, aka the name, grab every character up to the hyphen and the space. And what I want you to do is remove that. I want you to remove that from the name. And so then what that says is and then what this is doing is from a operation function in Tinderbox, it says keep everything else. So if I've got project hyphen space and then some text, what I'm telling Tinderbox is remove the project hyphen space and then hold everything else.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So then I go here and I then say if v short title, and this if part's really important from the logic. If short type if short title short title does not equal short title. So what I do here is if the short title does not equal the short title, then I want you to, and the reason I'm doing that is when you get larger files, it doesn't keep rewriting the same thing over and over and over again. Like basically this logic's saying is if the title does equal the short title, then don't do anything, right? If it does, then write it. And it's a little performance function. I figured out how to do it. So then I'm going to say short title, the attribute short title equals the short title.
So you've got two names here, short tile and short title.
Well, because I've got typos.
Okay. Okay.
The short title. Where did I do it?
In purple there.
Okay. So there's a great incremental formalization of Tinderbox. So what I did is I interjected a typo in the very beginning when I created that attribute short title. So all I need to do is go here. And this is one of the beauties of Tinderbox is it's super forgiving. I can go ahead and change it.
It's a global replace.
And then what I'll do back here is I'll just have to fix it there.
Yep.
Okay. And later I could use it if I had a bigger file and I didn't know where those things were, I could do a search and do a global replace, but I don't need to. So essentially now what we've done is we've written a function that says, let's parse out the name of the short title out of the notes. So then we can go to our folder. And this is another form of triggering action code. So if the on add does the one-time triggering of action code. A rule does it every few seconds, and the edict does it like once an hour. So we really only need it in the edict. And so what we're saying is, hey, Tinderbox, every once in a while, when you've got some free processing power, process this function we're calling short title. And that also automatically triggers when you actually highlight and support a note. So now watch what happens. If we go up here and we'll reset this notes. Okay. And okay, now why didn't this work? Didn't work because you don't have the space. So now you see project. And then if I go down here, I'll do the same thing on the projects folder. So now if we go down here and we look at that project, we'll give it a test. Okay. And you'll see here, we didn't add the on add to that test project. So we go down here, we say short title, just so we can see it.
I am grateful. My heart is aligned.
Sorry, I've got an automatic attribution affirmation thing that triggers every 90 minutes from Tinderbox. So you'll see here, project hyphen test project. So now our name is test project.
Yep.
So now we can later use that as when we want to interject reports and things like that.
Yep.
And let me just demonstrate that for you really quickly. So let's say I was doing some action code and I said, let's interject the value of the name. And what I got to do here is smart quotes. I'm going to turn off smart quotes so I can just type here real quick. If I go value, name, it's one thing. And then let's take that same. So this is what I'm demonstrating here is export code. And I'm showing you how you can pull in the different attribute values if you're actually writing a report. So value of the name, value of the short title. And if we look at that, project test.
Okay, so you're using the text of the note itself to do some report writing.
Correct. That's exactly what I'm doing. Right. And I'll demonstrate some of it. So that's the kind of, so, people think about Tinderbox as a note-taking tool, but it's really a full end-to-end comprehensive thought leadership, knowledge management, publishing environment.
Yeah.
Right. Because it was really invented to help originally to help publish blogs. And I think it's
publish what?
Blogs.
Oh, logs.
Blogs.
Blogs.
Yeah. Blogs. Right. So the other thing I wanted to show you here, which was really interesting, is this one. Function. Create notes. Now I've got a much more advanced nuance to doing this, but this will be a quicker way of demonstrating how we go about doing this. And let's go ahead and we'll say, let me grab one of my other, let me go pull this up real quick, just a second. Here we go. So let's say, and I'm going to pull in the input. So I'm going to say, input. Actually, no, I'm going to make this easy. So I'm going to hard code some stuff, and then down the road, we can variabilize it, right? But initially, let me just demonstrate this for you, because this is really important for this idea of, in the last few minutes, if you remember, Tiago's idea is you have projects, but then you have your resources folder. And in your resources folder, you have a thing called person. And we've talked about that we have people like Michael Becker and Paul Christie that would be across multiple projects, multiple areas, multiple roles. So if you think about this test note up here, when we created this note, I've got Michael Becker here. Do this, and we'll say test project 2. And if I could learn how to spell one of these days, be a useful tool. Okay, and in this one, we have, say, Michael Becker and Tom Diaz, right? So we've got Michael Becker in 2 projects, but where is the Michael Becker note, and how do we relate those to that? So let me show you what we're going to do here. We're going to say, what we're going to say, we're going to pass in the I. Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to say for every one that's in the participant, we're going to say, each X. Okay. Now watch this. So this is just so wickedly cool. It's really fun. So let's imagine this. So in the note, and let's walk through the abstraction thinking here. So in the note participant, participants. So in the note, each note has an item called participants. And in participants, there's one or more items in this set. And so what we want to say is for each item in the set, we want you to do something. Right. And what I'll be doing is passing the values of participant to the function. So here I'm passing the value, and we'll call it participants just so we can keep the same language. So I'm going to be passing the attribute value participants to the function. The function is going to take those values into the input participants, and we're going to say for the input participants for each item, what do I want?
Michael, if I can just clarify. So when the participant name is received by the function, it's received into a variable called iParticipants.
Yes, thank you. Okay. That's exactly what's happening. So now what we want to say here, we're going to trigger a function, and we're going to create a couple more variables. We'll say variable path, variable string. This is going to be vPath, and vPath is going to be equal to
Okay.
Okay, so and I'm hard in my file. I mean, you can imagine the complexity I've got. Yeah. I don't hard code anything anymore. I let it all variables pass and all that, but my abstraction mind is so good. It's gotten years of doing this. So, but for now, we're going to hard code this, and I'm going to spell things properly, right? So resources folder, people folder. Okay, so that's going to be my path. And now watch what's going to happen here. I'm going to say Tinderbox, I want you to create. Actually, we're going to create one more string here. We're going to create another variable called vNote.
Don't forget to correct the spelling of resources.
All right, thank you. One of these days, I'm going to go get tested for dyslexia. I'm almost positive I've got it. I don't even need to be tested. I know I do. And we're going to say vNote equals vPath plus X. And then we'll put the line here. Okay, so think about from an abstraction thing what we're doing. We're saying, hey, Tinderbox, grab me the items from the list of participants, pass it to this input value variable called iParticipants. Now we're saying create me another variable called path. The path I want participants to go to is resources folder / people folder /. Then create me another variable called note. Well, what is note? Note is going to be the path plus the item in the participants. So Michael Becker, Paul Christie, Tom Diaz. And what the .each operator is doing is it's saying for each item, do this until the list is complete.
Yep.
And what we're saying is what I want you to do, Tinderbox, is I want you to create vNote.
Yep.
Okay, so let's see if I successfully did this without screwing this up. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this. Okay, and we're now going to go to our projects code. We're going to open, and again, we're going to put it in the edict because it doesn't have to happen that often, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to happen immediately. And we're going to say, well, what do I want to pass you? I want to pass the participants. So for this note, what I want you to do is trigger the short title. Now trigger the create note and pass the values of participants to the function, which will then get converted to the iParticipant variable, which will then be processed by the note.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yep. And since you said an edict runs only occasionally, is that run now button at the bottom to make it run now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you wanted to. Okay, and now if we go up here, we can see if we.
I am grateful. I am capable of releasing thoughts that no longer serve me.
All right, so let's see why. Okay, now that didn't work. Okay, the reason why that didn't work is we're on the people folder and we're on the project folder. Create no project participants. I go here. And I did something. Okay. That's interesting. So it worked, but my path was wrong. So let's go fix my path. So what I did was, let's go look at the function. Guess what I did wrong?
It wasn't relative. It wasn't absolute. It was relative.
It wasn't absolute. It was relative. So if I add that,
Yeah.
okay. Now we go up here and let's delete these. Okay. And let's let that baby run. And okay. I must resource. Did I spell resources up here wrong? Our path name is wrong.
Oh, yeah.
You're putting a 3 in front of it. Do you want the 3 or do you care?
I'm just using it as a hierarchical sort, so I don't care.
I would just go like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, if we did that right, resources folder, we go here, let that baby run, and we now miraculously have 3 people that have been created.
Yeah.
Okay. Now watch this. Let's go back here and we say, what else do we want to have happen here? We want to have, let's pass another note. Let's go do this. Now watch this. This is neat. I path. And we can come up here and say, what we also want to pass is the path of this note. Or actually, better yet, let's say IID. I want to pass the ID of this note. And I want to go back down here and I want to say IID. And now I want to say link to. I think this should work. Let's see. IID. The link to, which one are we linking to? Let me look at the syntax for link to real quick. So now what I'm doing, and this is all part of the Tinderbox lesson, we're going to pop over to the, you don't have it. I'm popping over to the ATB ref, which is the Tinderbox documentation. And we're saying link to child, link to. Yeah, I think. Let me double check something. Yeah, are you pulling up the ATB ref?
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you do that real quick? And let me see. I think I need to do an eval. Let me double check my own code here. I need to. Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. I'm sorry. Let me go back to the note.
Okay.
Okay. So what I need to do here is let's create another attribute. We'll call just make sure the calendar's open. Create another attribute called v string the orig note. So that's the original note. Okay. And that is going to be equal to my ID. So the original note
Semicolon.
is the ID number of the original note. And so now what I want to do, let me go back to the code here. I want to create vpath equals X. That's the original note. And I want to say, what do I tell it eval? Yeah, I think all I need to do. No, I'm sorry. I'm complicating the crap out of it. I don't need to do that. Because think about the abstraction. The abstraction is I am currently selecting a note. Tinderbox's focus is currently on this note, this project.
Yeah.
And so now what I'm saying is I want you to go create the note Michael Becker, Paul Christie, Tom Diaz. And then I want you to link the note that I'm currently on to vnote, the note that we just created.
And
Okay.
vnote is okay.
Vnote's the note that we just created. So now if I go back here, I don't need this IID. So let's just clean that up a little bit. I was overcomplicating my mindset. So what that's just done is watch this. If I now go back to the projects, you'll now see that Tinderbox is now also linked the
Yeah,
note that is
automatically
just created. And then I can go like that, and then I can actually edit that person right there in the context of the note.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow,
So,
beautiful.
so if I go up here and I say now I'm going to add Mark Bernstein, I click away. The note Mark Bernstein's already automatically been created. You can edit it within the context of where you're at, go back and then keep working on your project.
And when you bring up that little text note, how do you get those attributes showing?
You pull right here, it says click to drag.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
So now it becomes a standalone window.
Gotcha.
All right. So now you'll see the note Mark Bernstein's been created. So now we've automatically generated an atomic note called Mark Bernstein. Link that to the project. So let's go up here then, and let's say now Mark Bernstein is also part of this project.
And because participants is a set, it won't create duplicate records.
Correct. So let's go. And then here's the other thing too is now watch this. Let me do this real quick. If you can then since Mark Bernstein already exists, all I have to do is check it like that.
Yeah.
Right. And now if I go down here and I look at Mark, he's now linked to both projects.
Very nice. And the thing that does that is that link to action.
That link to action. So once I've created the note link to, and here's the thing, Tinderbox is smart enough. I'm gonna go look in the people folder first. And if a note named Mark Bernstein already exists, I'm not going to create it. Now, here's the thing that you need to kind of be aware of. And this is, let's say you're Becker and you've interjected a typo in typing Mark Bernstein.
Right.
Right. Well, Tinderbox is not going to know what you meant by doing that. So it's going to go and create a spelled version of Mark Bernstein. So there is, if you've got dyslexia like me and having to chase down this whack-a-mole of chasing your typos.
Yeah.
Right. But that's easily done. You click here, you figure out which note that you figure out which project that was in. So this Bernstein is in that project. You double click here, you go fix it. Oops. You go fix it like that, put the correct one in. get rid of the incorrect one. And there's ways to automate this at some point too, and then just delete the one that you didn't want. Amazing.
Perfect.
Yeah. And now just think about this. This basic little sets of things that we've just done now, tasks, companies, projects, people, all the same.
Yep. Yep. Kind of, it's a second brain now
Yes.
with linking, with references, with prototypes.
Correct.
And, you know, one thing I have not appreciated enough as I've gone through learning Tinderbox is the value of prototypes. In other programs, they'll have template notes or
Yeah, prototypes are like they're it's not a paradigm shift, it's an isoquantic shift. It's like, you know, amoeba to monkey. I mean, it's just totally different universes.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me
Beautiful.
show you if you don't mind. Let me go ahead and I'm going to take over screen sharing right now.
Yep.
And as we wrap up today's class, and I'll just show you how where what we've done could ultimately end up. So as I've been talking about, you know, for a while now in a lot of my projects, you know, I've been working on several events and programs. And so that same concept that we just used, and remember, what people don't really embrace or realize is the power of Tinderbox in the templating functions and the outputting functions and this linking function. So I'm putting on an event and I've got tons of speakers. I've got tons of activities. I've got all of these programs. And you'll see here, what I've done is I'm calling these quotes from my speakers. And so in the body of the text, there's a quote. Here's all their information. But you'll notice like here, Gautam, I've got 2 quotes from him. And Jimmy Jones, I've got 2 quotes from Jimmy Jones. There's one from Jimmy. Here's another one for Jimmy, right? And so the point being is if I update Jimmy's information, I only want to update Jimmy's information in one place, the atomic note that is Jimmy Jones. So I've created a prototype called quotes. And what I do is just like we discussed, I have got a attribute called person. Anytime I put and so let me give you a new quote. So we'll go like here, and I'll go like this, and I'm going to create a new quote called Paul Christie. Right. And because I've done that, and the person Paul Christie does not exist, Tinderbox is going to, in just a minute, my file's got 10,000 notes. So sometimes it'll take a little bit to process it. Tinderbox is going to create a new note called Paul Christie, and we'll say demo. Right, there's your quote. And it may not, because I may not. Oh, there you go. Yeah. So it created the note called Paul Christie. I can now pull Paul Christie off, and I can quickly populate this and say,
yeah, very nice.
Right. So I can quickly populate this. And you'll notice down here, I also have a image headshot. I've got LinkedIn URL, which is another thing I've created. What's your title? I'll call you a Tinderboxer. And you're from the community of Tinderbox community. All right, and we'll say Becker's Patreon programs extremely helpful.
And it's true.
I'm just being a bit, you know, this is my unabashed sales pitch. If anybody watching this, please become my patron because I help you. So you see that, right?
Yep.
Now what Tinderbox allows you to do, and you can see, look at the literally hundreds of people I've developed in my file now. What Tinderbox allows you to do is produce templates. So where's my speaker templates? Okay, so I've got several speaker quote templates. So here's a simple template where this is that export code I was showing you before. Here's a bit more of an advanced template. And here's another one I've been playing with. And Tinderbox also supports selfies. Okay, so let me show you then. And again, we're out of time for today's session, but we'll go ahead and use our Paul Christie note. Where'd it go? Here it is. All right. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna put the basic template of quote on Paul Christie. So if I go like this, it comes up. Here's Paul's quote.
Beautiful.
Here's his name. Here's his picture. I'm like, that's okay.
Beautiful.
It's kind of functional, but I want it to look prettier because I'm doing this event. So I'm going to change the template. I've now got the template of here's the template, his masked image and all that. And then if I wanted to use the other one, I could go like that.
And those are essentially with CSS. Yeah.
Essentially with CSS. So if you want to look at it in real, here's the event I'm promoting. And now I've got stylized quotes for every one of my, and then this is all then feeding into my social media feeds and all of that.
Yeah. So this is where things can go.
Right now, and here's another example of where things can go. So I've created the quote, and now I'm up here, and I'm going to say, okay, I want to talk about, where's Stefan's? I'm going to talk about Stefan's quote. Why is what Stefan said really important? Well, in the wake of the 28 banking collapse, the Financial Stability Board from the G20 founds Glyph. Glyph has set these global standards. This is really critically important. This is why you need to come to my event. Right?
Yep.
Now, you'll notice I've put a bunch of terms here. This is like my keywords that I'm associating with the event. ACDC verified credentials, cybercrime, carry, legal identifiers, etc. Well, if you're doing a social media post, you want hashtags in your social media post, correct? You also want to be able to associate those posts with entities, your anchor tags, Aegis Mobile, Digital Trust Ventures, Ubi Secure, everyone that's related to this event. So I've gone ahead, like we were talking about before, and I created another function. Where is it? I created another function called create a hashtag cloud for me. So iterate through every one of those items. So now if I go back to your quote here, so let's look at Stefan's post. So I've written up what my social media post is going to be. I've associated the image with the quote that I want associated with Stefan's quote, and I've put in all the terminology and the entities that I want related with this quote. So then when I go preview it, it automatically produces the hashtag cloud for me.
Beautiful.
So now I just copy and paste that and dump it into LinkedIn. There's my post.
Yeah. And Michael, when earlier, just in terms of housekeeping, earlier you said, "Oh, this is a 10,000 node file." You got that from the command one attributes.
Yeah,
right?
actually, and I might have exaggerated. So let's see if I did. You might have caught me. If I went command one, let's see if I've exaggerated. Okay, this one's only 5,000. I've got another one that's 10,000.
Yeah, but that's how you check that. Okay.
In a couple 100,000 words. I do have another file that's got well over 10,000 notes.
Yeah. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. So this kind of, for those that are watching the end state, this is what the end state can end up being.
Yeah.
Just so we're very clear, I've written literally 500-page reports in Tinderbox. 100%, all of it in Tinderbox, published to a Microsoft Word document.
Yeah.
Right. So I do everything from the 140, 200 word tweet to the 500-page Word document, all managed in within this process.
Yeah. Well, definitely very helpful to me that I saw you online and was able to jump onto this and learned a huge amount. So thank you, Michael.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And we have recorded this, so this will be part of our Patreon channel, and this will get emailed out to all my patrons so that they can learn from this too. So Paul, thank you for letting us record the session and being the guinea pig.
Yep, absolutely.
And until next month, thank you very much.
See you next time. Thanks.
See you, everybody. Bye-bye.